Hello, my mimics, and welcome back to the Mimic Commentary, episode 69, the Albinauric Village. If you are not someone who follows the members only post, you might not have seen that this is recorded differently than my previous Mimic Commentary episodes. The two recordings that I did for this session, I wasn't happy with the narration. So this is me reacting to the gameplay footage. I didn't feel like I was giving it enough energy. So we're going to try again. There was a Trina Lily that we missed in the last episode, and it pointed directly to one of the Albinaurics. Interestingly enough, the area that we're seeing, I think St. Trina wants us to see all of these dead bodies in the trees. This is very evocative of Erdtree Burial. The tree just growing out all these corpses, and we have our imitation crabs again. The fact that these are like most likely mimic crabs that shoot sleep and are eating these Albinaurics is just pretty astounding to me. We also find another Trina Lily just right across the way. I don't know. I'm just astonished with the Albinaurics here, almost willingly sitting in the rot and the poison. It's definitely evoking to me a sense of trying to perhaps end their own lives in whatever way they can. We already see them kind of fading into nothingness by looking at their legs. They bleed silver. We think about the larval tears and how they can be born anew. And referring back to the poison mist item that we get from the Weeping Peninsula, it's definitely a case where the Albinaurics are trying to be reborn again, I think. Another interesting note is that on the border of the swamp is where the crystals are. I think I made mention in the last episode how the crystals just end when it meets the poison. And I think this is a deliberate choice that's going on here. Like, this is, we're supposed to be seeing there is this dichotomy between the soul absorbing crystals, these glintstones that house the residue or the residual life, completely stopping at the poison swamp. In the last episode, at the very beginning, we picked up the land squirts. And very interestingly, we got to think about this for the future, that they are summoned using HP rather than FP. So much like the land octopi, they need human blood for them to exist. And much like maybe something else we'll find in the future, they need human blood to exist. And that they are creatures that are rooted in one spot and spew poison. When you throw the poison bomb at them, it causes an explosion. And since we find them within the lakes, and we know now that the lake, Liurnia of the Lakes, is sitting above a giant, like, rotting lake from the Ainsel River episodes, and that there's this separation between the crystals and the poison, to me, I'm getting the idea that perhaps the land squirts are kind of a natural way to absorb poisonous material and ensure that there's no rot or poison within the area. If we think about the idea of mimicry, if we think about the idea of artificial life, especially life that requires human blood to exist, then I think we're seeing a case of perhaps maybe a man-made life form created to absorb poisonous materials from the water. I'm not too sure. But this is also our first introduction to what the Crystalians are as just an enemy. Now, we don't have their name as Crystalians yet. Like, we can't confirm that they're Crystalians. You know, Mimic Commentary rules, but come on. We know that they're Crystalians. I find it's interesting that they're located here. Like, I think this is the first introduction to Crystalians, or at least the earliest that you can get in the game. There is, you know, further up ahead, but I like to think, what is the significance that we're finding them next to the Albinauric village and amongst these crystals, especially considering where we're going to find them later. We learned from, I think it's Magic Downpour, that the Carians have a old accord with the Crystalians. We know that the Crystal Cadre is attempting to learn the wisdom of stone through the faint cognition of the Crystalians. What else did we learn about the Crystalians? That I guess we could find that the important thing is that the Academy doesn't know everything about the Crystalians. So they're trying to learn about them. Yet the Carians have an alliance with them. This is something we brought up in the study hall episode, especially in reference to the Erd Tree seeds. This idea of, we have one group that is in alliance with the Crystalians and another group that is trying to find secrets locked in their faint cognition, this wisdom of stone. To me, I think we could say that perhaps the Carians already know what this wisdom of stone is. And we can see why there's kind of like a butting of heads between the Academy and the Carians. One thing that's interesting, just as like on the aside, it's interesting doing a reaction to the gameplay because I was thinking of something different when I was playing, and I'm trying to remember what it was that I want to talk about. Perhaps, I think here, and this is kind of like, this is a different type of episode, so you might notice some weird things, that I was talking about how the soul could be imbued into the crystals. So are the Crystalians just sentient crystals? Are their soul, like, is it the soul of a person put into a crystal? Is it a soul that gains sentience? Or is it a crystal that gains sentience? Like, what came first, the sentience of the crystal or the sentience of the soul? Does that make sense? Like, is the Crystallian a soul that was sentient put into a crystal, or is it a crystal that became sentient? I guess that has to do with the nature of the soul and the spirit and where you think that resides. That's one of the interesting questions I think that these games like to ask. What is the soul and the spirit, and what does that relate to, as a person? Where does your personhood come from? Those are definitely questions I want to continue to look at, but I don't know if we have time to do that now that we're at the Albinauric village. One thing that's like important to note is just how much atrocity is at the Albinauric village. This whole region is just polluted with poison and muck and mire. I think at this point I was talking about Trina lilies, why there's so many Trina lilies here. But the interesting thing about why is this place poisonous? And could it have to do with what happened at the Albinauric village? Like, what came first? Was it the poison swamp that came first? Or was it this massacre that came first, and then it made it poisonous? We see that the Albinaurics are fading into nothingness, like their legs are literally fading away. If we think about how we get an Albinauric blood clots usually form in the legs first. I'm not a doctor or a nurse or whatever, but if I ask Kristen, she'll tell me about blood clots and stuff. But they form in the legs. And if we think about Albinaurics being man-made, we have the froggy-looking Albinaurics, and then we have these old men-looking Albinaurics. To me, that's giving me an indication that they're like, oh, we made these people and their legs don't work. They're immobile. let's try again. And this time we'll combine their DNA with that of a frog, so they'll have stronger legs. But now they're frog people. They're not that smart. They can't talk. I don't think we've seen them cast magic yet. But they are discriminated against because of their created status. We also found the stone coffins here. Now, if we think about how the Albinaurics are said to believe to live impure lives, if we think about that word impurity and where we might see that again in the future, I think it's pretty clear what we're being told here about the stone coffins. When we think about Erd Tree burial and how the Erd Tree is hewn from remembrances and also hewn remembrances, like it's created of memories and it creates memories. Why would the Albinaurics be buried into stone coffins instead of the Erd Tree roots? Is it because the belief is that since they don't have grace, they shouldn't be in the Erd Tree? Or is it bigger than that, where we don't want their memories going into the Erd Tree? Since these are silver life forms, they have some association with being reborn again. And that could lead to maybe generations of memories that we don't want being added into the collective history, culture, and knowledge of the lands between. It's just something to think about. It's also something to think about for maybe other stone coffins and why they are the way that they are. You also hear a lot of crying in the Albinauric village. You can hear the Albinaurics kind of weeping and shaking. Rightfully so, based on the atrocities that we're seeing here. But the idea about larval tears and silver tears, hidden tears, cerulean tears, crimson tears, a lot of tears all over the place, and it's interesting that the Albinaurics are one of those tearful people.
Oh, it's you. Well, what do you make of it? What's happened to this village? I witnessed a sight much the same in my infancy. The oppression of the weak. Murder and pillage unchecked. A waking nightmare made by men.
One of the important things to note about Nepheli's dialogue is she doesn't indicate whether or which side of the atrocity that she was on. Was she, a child who's was part of a tribe or a family or a group or a city or town that was massacred by men? Or was she a child and the men in her family were part of a tribe that massacred them? She's Nepheli Loux, and we know about Horaloo, chieftain of the Badlands, and we've kind of already deduced that Horaloo is Godfrey after he's banished, taking his warriors to go war and fight and die outside the lands between. So I could imagine that perhaps Nepheli Loux is in the Loux clan, and she witnessed maybe her father, her uncles, her brothers doing something similar to what's happened here at the Albinauric village and causing harm unto others. And even though she wasn't physically harmed, that's still traumatizing to see the people you love commit such atrocities. That it's very reminiscent of Dany and A Song of Ice and Fire, where she marries into a Khalasar of the Dothraki with Khal Drogo, and she witnesses these similar types of atrocities by her new subjects, her new people, and she wishes it to stop. We might go further into the analysis of how Khal Drogo and Horaloo are parallels. But right now, I don't know if we have enough information to really talk about that. Probably in Shadow of the Erd Tree we will. Probably in Shadow of the Erd Tree. Maybe not, though, because we need his remembrance. It's hard to say. But that's the vibe I get from Nepheli Loux. I get her feelings of betrayal from her family committing atrocities. A little foreshadowing there, but I think I think we're supposed to kind of assume that it's repetitive, that she wasn't the victim, she witnessed others being victimized, and I think that's the important distinction.
But this time, I'm a woman grown, and though the suffering cannot be undone, I can still mete out justice. Justice to the oppressors. Let the scars I carve remind them. I am Nepheli Loux, warrior.
Yeah, I think that dialogue kind of says it all. She wants, you know, it can't be undone, but she wants to do something about it. You know, thinking from like my perspective, the idea of kind of getting revenge for the pain that has been caused to you, you know, that doesn't solve, you know, anything. It doesn't even make you feel better. At least I don't think. Some people would claim that revenge makes them feel better. I've had someone tell me that that like that's the only way they could feel better is if they got revenge. Personally, I don't agree with that. I don't think that helps you heal. And I think based on what we'll see with Nepheli is, I don't think she's going to heal from that either. Something else is going to heal her, and I think that's a very poignant message that Elden Ring is trying to make. Now, one thing that we didn't really get to talk about last episode was Vow of the Indomitable, that it is an Ash of War, so it's a memory of ancient Erdtree warriors. And since it's found in the Albinauric village, you know, that tells me that some of these people, these old men, must have been present as ancient Erdtree warriors. They must have memories of fighting for the Erdtree in ancient times. I don't know how any else way to put it other than that would show this. There was a silver influence at the start or at the beginning or right after the beginning of the Erdtree. That these people who could be long lived, possibly beings that could be reborn, because these guys are very old, were there at the start of the Erdtree. The village is done for. Please, even if it's just you, old Albus, hide well and still your breath. Yeah, we'll analyze that dialogue later. You know, one thing that I also find interesting about the Albinauric village is that it's all men. There's only men here. And it's only old men. You know, there's not many women we find in the lands between, really at all, actually, which is quite interesting. You know, that it's common in, I think, most Miyazaki's games. Very few of the enemies and NPCs are actually women. I think Elden Ring probably has the highest quantity of, like, female enemies. I just find it interesting that it's mostly all men, old men in the Albinauric village. I also find it interesting that there are so many Erdtree faithful in the Albinauric village. You know, that kind of ties with the Vow of the Indomitable, that even though they are believed to live impure lives, untouched by the Erdtree's grace, we find the memory of ancient Erdtree warriors, and we find so many bodies with the commoner set on, showing faith in the Erdtree. So there are Albinaurics who are still faithful. There are people who are, even though that they're scorned by the culture, they're still faithful to the religion. We also find our first spell-casting Albinauric. Trying to look at his staff, it looks like there's a little bit of a blue glintstone at the edge, but it's hard to say. It's a very small staff, too. I'm not sure where we get the Albinauric staff, but it is important. It is important when we get it. The lore behind it. But it does show that there is intelligence with them. Like, we can hear them talk, and we can hear them cry. We know that they're sentient, that they're intelligent. We see that there's so many people that look like they're Erdtree commoners. You know, I guess the idea is that, you know, these men are no different than anyone else, other than just like what their bodies are made out of, and that they're made from human hands. It'd be interesting to see, what does a younger Albinauric look like? We've met the woman with her wolf, definitely very silver-coated, most likely an Albinauric. but we don't have confirmation yet. But, you know, why... There's just the leg thing. Overlooking our crystals, we found the crystal sword. It has int scaling, which is very interesting, and spinning slash. You know how we love spinning slash. We always tie spinning slash to our Eternals and our water dancing culture. I think I was deciding like, oh, I'm going to use this sword, but the build is bad and the sword wouldn't be good. Sword fashioned from pure crystal, a deed impossible for a human, enwreathed with powerful magic. Its attack scales with intelligence. The inscrutable Crystalians have but one clear purpose, to safeguard their crystals unto the end. One theory posits that they yearn for the return of the Creator, who will carve for them new brethren. All right, I'd like to break this down from kind of in different parts. So one theory posits that they yearn for the return of the Creator, who will carve from them new brethren. Since this is a theory, I think we can say the theory is incorrect. And because it's giving us a theory about where they come from, I think we should start thinking like the opposite is like true. So do they yearn for their Creator? No, they don't yearn for their Creator, who will carve for them new brethren. So that I think the falsehood here, since it says that this is a theory, I think it's that means in universe, this is what someone else believes. I think it could be, we could say they don't yearn for their Creator who will carve for them new brethren, but why don't they? Could it be that there is no Creator who will carve for them new brethren? That the idea is that we're looking in the village of the Albinaurics. This is people who are made by human hands. And now we find Crystalians. Their crystal is, their swords, their weaponry are fashioned from pure crystal, and that's impossible for a human. So whoever created the Crystalians can't be human. So the theory is positing that some non-human entity is creating crystal people, and in them is some wisdom of the stone. Now, it could be the case that there is no Creator for the Crystalians. The Crystalians could form from a natural occurrence. Like no one person creates them. If we think about how crystals can house the soul, this is something that is consistent within the Dark Souls universe with the crystal soul spear and things of that nature, and how glintstone appears to be a conduit for thought and the soul. If we think about soul arts from Demon Souls, how the power of the soul allows imagination to manifest into physical miracles or spells, then it could be the case that because the soul is inside of the crystal, it just brings them to life in some way. Perhaps. I can't say for certain. We have to find more evidence. The interesting thing is that it's also enwreathed with the powerful magic, so it scales with intelligence, just like glintstone sorceries. So it's making me think that it is a lot of the soul that is just imbued in the crystal itself. And this is why the inscrutable Crystalians have but one clear purpose, to safeguard their crystals unto the end. Because inside the crystals are souls. That's what I'm getting at. And now this is what makes it important. So if the Crystalians have a clear purpose to safeguard their crystals unto the end, and they have an alliance with the Carians, that means the Carians in an old of Cord are aligned in the goal of safeguarding the crystals unto the end. Now, this puts them in direct oppositions to the Academy and the Crystal Cadre. They're not interested in the safeguarding of the crystals. They want the wisdom of stone. They want as much knowledge and information as possible. And there's some knowledge not everybody needs. Not everybody needs to know everything. And I think that's kind of where it's getting at. You know, looking at the sword, this might be a little off. It kind of looks like at the top of the sword, it looks like their heads doing the praise the sun emoji. Even though that's not praise the sun. We will actually see that animation later in Elden Ring. It originates from demon souls. If you have the ring of sincere prayer and you cast any miracle of God, you do the what is known as the praise the sun emote. But it's really just it's a form of worship in the Miyazaki Miyazaki mythos. So we'll see that later on, and we can talk about it then when we get to that. But it's interesting that the sword kind of looks like it has that type of look to it. Then at some point, I start looking through the I start looking through all the items to find what they all scale with, and I thought it was interesting that the Rose's axe also scales with intelligence, making it more clear to me that since the Rose's axe summons spirits that are lost in death, or skeletons that are lost in death, but really spirits that are lost in death, that both of them are leaning on the fact that there is spirit manipulation going on with the crystals and the glintstones, tying that intelligence, and that having intelligence is how you can manipulate the spirit and the soul. Faith seems to be a way to manifest your belief in something. You're manifesting, you're taking the power of your soul and you're using faith in something to create it, as opposed to intelligence. Intelligence being the way we logic and deduce things, and faith just our belief in something. The combination of the two is incredibly strong, incredibly powerful when, if you can have logic, if you can use your intelligence, if you can use reasoning to come to a conclusion, and you can use, you have faith that you believe it to be true, that you have convinced yourself with your intelligence. That's kind of like, I see it in that way. Kind of like on the spiritual side, that the intelligence comes first and then there's faith. I hope that makes sense. You can't, there's no, no other species other than humans don't have enough intelligence to have faith, if that makes sense. You need to be, you need to have a modicum of intelligence to be able to have faith in something. You need to be able to develop those thoughts and ideas to be order to be faithful in it, if that makes sense. I don't think when my dog has to poop or something, I guess maybe she has faith that I'm going to feed her or whatever, but that's not what I mean by faith. Just simple musings, So we didn't ask the question yet of who massacred the Albinauric village. We have the faux sorceries that use their blood, so fake sorceries that use their blood created by the Cuckoo Knights. Did the Cuckoo Knights massacre this village? Maybe they massacred the village because they wanted their blood. They can use their blood to make weapons. But coming up ahead, we kind of learn who our culprit is, and it's a guy holding an Erd steel dagger, which is notable for being... Wait, gotta read the item. Carried by Erdtree royalty and self-defense. So we have someone from Erdtree royalty with a tabard with intertwined snakes on it. Those intertwined snakes, while it's just a common motif that we see throughout just culture and history, I think it looks very similar to, let me just double check. Okay, no, I'm sorry that I thought it looked similar to the intertwined snakes found in the Ashes of Ariandel DLC. But it's slightly different, but it's still, I think, very relevant. When I think intertwined snakes, and at least in the context of Miyazaki's work, I got to think of the primordial serpents. And it's interesting. This is our first, and I think only Mikola lily found in the Albinauric village. There's so many Trina lilies outside of the Albinauric village, but there's one Mikola's lily inside of the village. The Mikola's lily says that it's faith in the Halig tree, not faith in Mikola. Just make sure it's very clear that the Mikola's lily is faith in the Halig tree, and it's found within the village. Outside the village is the Trina lilies, and outside the village is the imitation crabs. So I don't know what that's supposed to say about the large quantity, because it's supposed to be the faith in Saint Trina is outside of the village, but it's on the cusp of it. Whereas faith in Mikola is inside of the village. Very hard to say. I'm not really certain. But if we think, yeah, it's very hard to say. I'm not sure what it's supposed to indicate for the faith of the Albinaurics. That only one Mikola's Lily is found in there. And I'm also not sure what we should be doing with our Mikola's Lily, other than maybe it's supposed to be maybe it's Mikola's influence or Halig Tree influence. I like look and listen for St. Trina lilies, but I'm not sure about Mikola's lilies. All right, let's go fight our guy. He looks like he has a fur cloak. He throws fire. We also throw fake fire. He throws his own fake fire out of his perfumes. We don't know they're perfumes yet, but come on. He also has a different animation for drinking. Now, he's not drinking like a flask of Crimson Tears. He's drinking the things that he has in his left hand. And then he uses it to buff himself up. This is more of kind of like imitation. When we know that perfumers use Miranda powder to create concoctions. They're making, to my estimation, they're trying to mimic the power of the Erd Tree, very man-made power of the Erd Tree in that regard. It's part of that, like when we think of our rules of mimicry, the original, the mimic, and the genuine article. If we think about our flasks, we have the Flask of Wonder Physique. That one is the mimic, obviously. But then we have Crimson Tears and Cerulean Tears. Which one's the original and which one is the genuine article? Well, just based on what they look like and some little foreshadowing, little prophetic knowledge, I would say Cerulean Tears are the original and the Crimson Tears are the genuine article. The Flask of Wondrous Physique, that is our mimic. And it looks like the perfumers kind of fall in that line of mimicry where they're using concoctions. They're taking pieces of the environment. They're crafting them together to make imitations of the power of the tree. We'll have to learn like the fire stuff, what exactly that means, because I don't think we've seen anything from the trees that indicate that they can do fire. They're weak to fire, so I'm not sure. Maybe it's just like it's a gross perversion of using the power of the Erd Tree. I tried to farm him for a bit. I didn't get any items that I really wanted, so we're just going to skip past that. So we have our glowing pot. We're not going to interact that yet until we, I'm going to pretend like I didn't see it. But we get our ivory sickle in a stone coffin, literally inside the stone coffin, telling me they're putting, I think that's direct confirmation. You're putting Albinaurics in stone coffins. Because the ivory sickle says, oh, just kidding, we're going to look at it first. It's a dagger. Very cool. It's hooked. Anything else with hooks? Shotels have hooks. The shotels have hooks. I don't know if we have any shotels in our inventory. There's a spiral hill. Oh, the forked hatchets. Yeah, the shotels and the forked hatchets. I don't know if that's supposed to give us any indication. Sickle fashioned from ivory. So they're making these from the teeth of animals or the tusks. We're gonna have to look for an animal that could have its tusk or teeth harvested to make it, or it could be an extinct animal. Ooh, maybe it's traditionally elephants. Maybe it's the ancestral spirit found in Shifra? Is there a thing as elk ivory? Okay, so there's a thing as elk ivory. So perhaps this ivory comes from, the only animals I can think of that they would probably be using. Yeah, the only one I just thinking of where this all leads to. ancestral spirits. That's what I think from them. Sickle fashioned from ivory, weapon carried by aged Albinaurics. Very old. Very old. Everybody says they're old. These weapons are evidence of their dedication to the Haligtree, despite never having entered its presence. So, never got to the Haligtree, but they have faith in it. They're dedicated to it. So, definitely more Mikola Lily's side than the Trina Lilies. But why are the Trina Lilies there? Why are the Trina Lilies there? That is such a great... Oh, gosh. There's so many, too. I feel like it's supposed to be a diversion. I feel like it's supposed to make us think the Trina Lilies and the Mikola Lilies are related in a way, you know, that lends them to being like, what would you call it? Like that lends them to being like similar or equal. Does that make sense? Like, I know what you're going to say. You know, we don't have this information in the Mimic commentary, but I know what you're going to say, that, you know, X is Y. And that's not what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is why? Like, it just feels like it's overcompensating. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's just so many. Why are there so many? Why are there so many? That's kind of like what I'm getting at. Another thing about the stone coffins is the mausoleums where the soulless demigods are at. Those are stone coffins too. So the Albinaurics are in stone coffins, and the soulless demigods who are slumbering, the sleeping soulless demigods, whose sigil is the eclipse, and they got eclipse soldiers and eclipse knights who seem to be tied to deathbird rituals and the sun realm. They're also in stone coffins, which seems to be anti-Erdtree. So at the Wandering Mausoleums, older than Erdtree, I think we could say, and maybe anti-Erdtree. Faith in the Haligtree, thought to be beloved by the Empyrean Mikkel in his youth, making me think that, you know, what came first, the Haligtree or Mikola? What came first, Mikola's Lily or Mikola? Based on what we're reading in the text right now, it makes me think the Haligtree is older than Mikola. The aged Albinaurics have dedication in the Haligtree. We don't know much about Mikola yet. We don't know who his daddy is, who his mommy is. Actually, do we know about who Melania's parents are? I don't know if we have that yet. Well, I mean, we could just use our prophetic knowledge. The children of Radigan America, second Elden Lord. So they come late in the timeline. But these are the aged Albinaurics, and they have memories of ancient Erdtree. So did they convert to Haligtree because the Haligtree's new, or have they always been Haligtree because they are, you know, the Erdtree doesn't like them, but they have the Erdtree commoner stuff. So maybe their faith in the Haligtree is secret. That could be what it is. They're trying to appear that they have faith in the Erdtree, but really they have faith in the Haligtree. And perhaps maybe that is why they were massacred, because of their secret faith in the Haligtree. So he's wearing cloth. He's got a funky mask. He can breathe fire. That makes me think of Dragon Communion, being able to breathe fire. And he has these gnarly looking horned weapons. And he kills omens. We don't have much on the omens yet. We know Margit the Fell Omen, so Guy's not a friend of Margit. Carrying a Crucible Knot Talisman. Since we got the Crucible Knot Talisman, and I didn't really give it much time or thought in the recording of this episode, next episode we're going to do... we're going to look at the Crucible Knot Talisman before we continue on with our adventuring, because I think that by looking at the other things, such as, you know, the Crucible Knot, the Crucible Knights, and the Ancestral Followers, especially with this Ivory stuff, I think we could do a lot of good theorizing. So we're going to save that for the next episode. I hope you guys appreciate kind of the discussion that we had in this one. I know it was different. So, you know, I just as an update, I wasn't really feeling very well. And I just didn't record something that I thought was good enough for everybody. So we try again. All right. You know the drill. Let's do the thing.